Hey everybody, it's Riley Bowman with concealedcarry.com, and I'm excited to bring to you today an overview video on two new products from Heckler Koch, or HK as commonly known. And these were recently sent to me for evaluation purposes from them. And in full disclosure, we have a relationship, working relationship with the folks over there. But thankful to get our hands on these right up front. I don't know if these are even available in stores yet. I think they will go. They'll start shipping to stores the week of SHOT Show, so they're not even out in the public just yet. I've been shooting the HK pistols now, primarily the VP9L and the VP9SK for the last year and a half. It'll be 2 years this year, and they've been fantastic guns. I've shot this exact one right here at multiple area and national level championships in USPSA. It's actually my competition gun. It's set up for that purpose with an optic and everything. And this is not my exact carry copy. This is actually Jacob's, but I have an SK as well that I carried for quite a bit and really like shooting. I don't really have a ton of experience with a standard VP9. We have one here in the shop, but they're all great guns. And so what's new from HK are some new options, and by that, primarily new size options. And so we'll go ahead and reveal what we have here in the on the table. And so the new releases are the VP9F that you see right here, and the VP9K right here. And so what this represents is a full-size VP9 that is what I would consider true full size, because this is a duty-sized pistol, full-length grip, capable of supporting 17-round magazines, and has a 4.5-inch long barrel. Right, so very typical and fits right in with many of your other duty pistols that exist in the industry that are on the market today. And so full-size, true full-size gun, you contrast that with a standard VP9, which has been around for about a decade, and it has a full-size grip, but the barrel is only 4 inches or 4.09 inches. So not that there's anything wrong with that per se, but there are some that would like to have that little bit extra length, a little bit more velocity from your rounds, from your especially defensive rounds, and that might be relevant to a duty cop or somebody working on the streets. And so this is a true full-size gun, and that's a nice option to see. How does that contrast with the VP9L? Also a full-size gun, full-length grip, but this one's got a 5-inch barrel. And again, I've been shooting this competitively now for some time, exclusively for a little more than a year. And it's a great gun, but there are some that may not want to have a full 5-inch long gun, which is fairly long. And I'll tell you one thing too, that amongst law enforcement, a lot of times they don't even want to have that long of a barrel, because then the holster's got to be longer and you're constantly getting in and out of your patrol car. I've been there, done that as a former LEO myself, and having something a little bit shorter than this is nice. Some guys like that 4-inch length, and that's fine, but I always liked carrying something more of this size. 4.5-inch barrel, full length grip, 17 or more capacity in terms of rounds. That's really cool to see a, kind of an option that exists between that 5 and 4-inch barrel length. Contrast that now with a mid-size option in the form of the VP9K. And this one I'm really intrigued by, because this is a mid-size, it's basically full-size in many regards, but it's a mid-size gun. It's got a 15-round capacity magazine and grip length. So a little bit shorter. It's going to work a little bit better for concealment purposes. Might even work better for some people with smaller hands. And so it's a little bit of a smaller gun. It kind of sandwiches itself between your regular VP9 and your VP9SK. And so that's what we have on the table here is we basically got, and there is one additional model you should know, although it's, it's really more geared towards competition exclusively, not that it has to be, but you got a VP9 Match, which is a 5.5-inch long barrel. But we've got the primary models here on the table, VP9L, VP9F, the new gun, VP9, VP9K, and the VP9SK, all lined up here, big to small. So it's kind of cool to see that rounding out the lineup in that way. But there is some news coming later on in this video that you're going to want to stay tuned to because it's going to impact this product lineup. I think is probably good for you to be aware of. But let's now focus instead our attention on the new features of the VP9. They're actually called the VP9A1 series of pistols. So these two new guns are classified as VP9A1 models. The VP9F and the VP9K, and these are just VP9s, these other ones that have existed for, again, in some cases, the original VP9 was released, I think, in 2014, so it's been a little more than 10 years. So, the new features in the A1 series of guns, let's go ahead and focus primarily on the VP9F. And to be clear, in case you're not aware with how we do things here at concealedcarry.com, all these guns we have on the table today for review purposes have what's called in them a barrel block. So an orange polymer rod that's installed through the chamber, through the end of the muzzle. We can see it protruding there, and that tells us that there's no way we can introduce live ammunition into the chamber and ultimately fire them in these guns. So I won't necessarily try to violate any safety rules as far as firearm handling, but you should just be aware if I'm orienting the pistol certain directions, there's really nothing to be too concerned about. But here we have the VP9F. Full-size gun, 4.5-inch barrel, 17 round capacity magazine. And the first thing I'm going to focus your attention to, and a feature that I happen to really like, even though it doesn't necessarily impact me, but I recognize where it's coming from or why it's important probably to some of you, and that is that the A1 series of pistols has eliminated the finger grooves on the grip of the gun. What does that look like? Well, as you'll see on the older versions here, and this is something that HK has done for quite a few years across a number of their products, is they'll have these little finger grooves. They're very subtle. There are some companies out there, some manufacturers that have made ones that are much more pronounced than these, but those have been appreciated by many shooters for the ergonomics and the feel. Hey, this feels good in the hand. It feels like it fits my hand well, things of that nature. Now, while how a gun feels in your hand doesn't necessarily translate to how well it will shoot or perform for you, it is good to have a gun that feels good, that's comfortable, that fills the hand. Filling the hand is probably more important than anything else because we want to fill the hand and get as much contact between our hands and the grip of the gun as possible when shooting. But these grooves come with a potential downside, and that is if your hands or fingers are too big, or too small to really line up with those predetermined finger grooves, then it may not fit your hand or feel as comfortable to you as you would like. In fact, my compadre here at concealedcarry.com, Jacob Paulson, this is his SK, and he really likes it, but one of the things he doesn't care for is that he has a finger that lands right on this groove-shaped portion of the grip down here, and he'd really prefer that that were not the case. And there's some of that's somewhat true on the full-size gun with its grooves, but going to a straight front strap where there's no grooves at all just eliminates the potential that someone's going to have a hand fitment issue in terms of interfacing with those grooves. Now, we keep all of the other amazing benefits as far as its customization or the ability for you to make it your own. And what that is you have the interchangeable backstraps as well as the interchangeable side panels. And the original VP9 had a total of 27 possible configurations that you could create by changing the backstrap and side panels, because there's a slim side panel, a medium-sized side panel, and a large side panel. So you could make these side panels thinner or fatter depending on your preference, depending on your size of the hand. Changing, increase in the circumference of the grip would help a gun fit a larger hand a little bit better. And that's in addition to also being able to change backstraps to make that a little bit smaller, a little bit longer or deeper or fatter, or however you want to think of it. And so you had the small, medium, and large backstraps for the VP9s as well. I should mention it also exists for the P30 line of pistols from HK, which is great. But not only the 27 different combinations that used to be available, they've actually now expanded that to 54. Which is tremendous. And the way that's happened is now there are additional backstraps available for these guns, especially for the VP9A1 series, where you get medium and large backstraps that have an extended length of pull, meaning that you can increase the space from back of the grip to the trigger. So if you had a situation where you felt like the trigger is too close to your finger and you're overwrapping that trigger with your finger, then you can use one of those extended back straps, the large and the medium size, to get your own customized fit of gun. And so that is probably one of the big things I would first point you to, is how they've changed and redesigned what was already a very good, very comfortable, and very ergonomic grip in the original VP9 lineup, and have now made it, in my opinion, better. The one thing that I would criticize a little bit, and I say this as an actual Team HK sponsored shooter, this is the gun I shoot in competition for that team, is that I wish that the stippling or the texture of the grip was a little more aggressive. Actually, quite a bit more aggressive would be my preference, but just a little more aggressive would be appreciated on these guns. It's not a bad texture. I can shoot with this just fine under normal circumstances, but I do like to see a little bit more grippy texture. You'll see on my competition gun, I actually have a Taylor Freelance brass backstrap that has a lot of extra texture, and I've also custom textured this side panel here, just custom stippled this myself. But I also have some Taylor Freelance brass side panels, recently released product from Taylor Freelance. It's not on this gun, it's on my other competition gun, which sits at home right now. And so I've added those so I can get more texture, and so that's a personal preference, but I would like to see a little more aggressive texture on these new guns as well, and that's okay. We can't hit everything exactly. We can't make everybody happy. I think the texture, and I have this out on the table just as an example, but this is the new HK CC9, their new micro compact, released a couple months ago. And I actually quite like the texture that this comes with. Even this could be more aggressive, probably in my opinion. However, it's a very good texture. I find it to be plenty grippy enough for the average person, and for this is a good concealed carry gun. It's something you can depend upon in a defensive situation. And even just going to a texture like that on these, I think, would be a big improvement. I imagine that texture over a larger surface area on the larger grips of these guns, and I think it'd be a winner. But anyway, that's just a little bit of my opinion there, and I'm pleased and privileged to say that I appreciate HK for wanting even those of us that have a relationship, a working relationship with them, to speak openly and honestly about things that we don't necessarily care for. And that's how hopefully they will continue to grow and develop and make their products better. All right, so I talked about the grip changes, and I think those are really significant grip changes, but there's one that's maybe not immediately noticeable, especially when holding it in this profile, but you will note that the bottom of the grip has a little bit of a different profile, and it's not only different from looking at it this way, but especially so from this angle right here. And so what's happened here is they've now enlarged and flared the magwell opening on the grip, and that, I think, is a huge bonus to these guns. The original VP9s had a little bit of a narrower opening, not always the easiest one to do mag changes, mag reloads, and things of that nature with. This new one, though, is a fantastic magwell. I mean, it's not only enlarged and flared, but they did a fantastic job, because I've seen some similar ideas from other companies that weren't always executed as well, in my opinion, where they'll have it enlarged or flared, but there'll still be maybe kind of a weird corner or something inside there where a magazine could occasionally catch on as you're inserting it. But this has been enlarged, flared, and it's also incredibly smooth. And that is fantastic. It is super easy to do magazine exchanges on the new VP9A1 series of guns. And also true on the VP9K. Even though it's shorter, it is also equally as large and flared and smooth as the VP9F. So that's fantastic. By the way, the VP9F, at least as it arrived here, shipped with a 17-round magazine and a 20-round magazine. I don't think there's really been any change to the 20-round magazines that they've already had for years, but it works just fine. And the new 17-round magazines have a little update which is relevant to the flared magwell opening, in that there's been a scallop added and along with some texture, some serrations there, because in case you need to grasp the base pad of the magazine and pull it out. If it gets stuck in there for some reason, you can do that. On the older guns, that scallop existed on the grip itself, and the base pad of the magazine was flat and square, but that grip scallop allowed you to get a hold of that and strip it out. So because we have this new updated flared magwell opening, that scallop has been added to the magazine base pad itself. So that's relevant and good to know. Next major feature that I think is a important one to note and a huge improvement is I'm going to actually focus on the trigger itself. So the trigger on the VP9s have been known to be an industry-leading trigger, especially when these were first released in 2014. This was one of the best triggers you could find in a striker-fired pistol on the market, right from the factory. Over the years, there's been a lot of competition come onto the market in that regard, and I think that the VP9 has kind of lost some of its standing, if you will, as far as having that industry-leading awesome trigger right from the factory. And that's just the nature of competition. One of the things that you will know if you were to take apart an original or standard VP9 and look at the trigger bar, they're typically from the factory come in a black nitride, I think it's nitride color, and that black trigger bar, understand that the trigger bar is what connects the trigger shoe to the sear in the back of the trigger, and that trigger bar, as it moves in its channel, that's where some of the friction is generated when you're pressing the trigger. And so if you felt like your trigger is a little bit gritty or a little bit stiff or just doesn't move as smoothly as you'd like it to, it often is going to be tied to that trigger bar and how it slides back and forth in that channel, and also how the trigger bar interfaces with the trigger shoe itself and the sear. The new VP9A1 series of guns, that trigger bar is, and you'll see it on the side of the trigger there, you can see there's a silver colored trigger bar that's connected to the shoe. It's a nickel-Teflon coated trigger bar, and it is much smoother. In fact, my competition updated, improved, trigger from Gray Guns, they worked it over for me, has the same kind of trigger bar, and it's a fantastic trigger. And actually this VP9F and the VP9K from the factory feel very similar in the quality of trigger pull to my competition upgraded VP9L. I won't say it's quite as good, or actually this one's a little bit lighter in overall weight. I didn't put these on a specific trigger weight scale, didn't have that opportunity yet, but this one comes in at about 3.5, 3.75 pounds with my Gray Guns updated trigger, and I would guess that these factory ones are around 5 pounds, at least how they feel to me. And I'll try to get those on a trigger weight scale before long. But it's really smooth, and so all that pre-travel is really smooth up until a point you hit a very defined wall, and then you press through the wall and it's a nice crispy break of the trigger. It's a fantastic trigger. This is often, I think, how you would get a trigger to break in after 500 rounds, 1,000 rounds, 2,000 rounds through an older standard VP9. And so that's how I would like to think of this, is that these new triggers in the VP9A1 series come from the factory already broken in, is one way to kind of look at that. I definitely find them to be improved, and that is not a bad thing. An easier trigger makes it easier to shoot. It's not the end-all be-all, but we like easier to use triggers. The next thing I'd like to bring your attention to are improved ergonomics and texture, if you will, or in this case serrations. And they're not only serrations, but they're also enlarged controls for the slide release or slide stop. All right, so the original slide stop it's kind of like a stamped metal with some serration, to the surface of it. and it's not bad. I've used these again. I've used them for a couple years now, and I've not had any issues with the factory slide stop or slide release, but I really find myself liking the extra raised portion and the more aggressive serrations on the slide release. And that's true on both sides. VP9 has been well known for having a true ambidextrous platform, especially in the case of the paddle mag release like you see here on my A1s. Some of my other guns here are what's called the B model, which has the push button mag release right here. So these are not true ambidextrous guns, even though you can switch those buttons around. But on the VP9A1 series, these are true ambidextrous guns. You've got a truly ambidextrous mag release, and you have a true ambidextrous slide stop or slide release. And that improved serration and slightly raised profile, it's not so much it's going to cause any problems for you personally as a user, I don't think, nor should it cause issues with most of your holster manufacturers out there. I have here one of our KSG Armory Lexington holsters, and we didn't have to make any updates to the holster mold or anything like that to make the new VP9A1s fit in our holster, which was designed for the older guns with a slightly less of a profile on that slide release. And so no problems there, but it's definitely an improved experience. Whether you are intending to use it to release a slide or to lock back a slide, it's much easier to do. And that's, again, both right-handed or left-handed. And so that's another great improvement as well to these guns. So very happy with the new serrations and raised profile of the slide stop. Not only that though, but there are some improvements to a few other areas in terms of how your gun or how your hand interfaces or connects with the gun. And that's actually really everything we're talking about here today. Is pretty much all of these updates have to do with improving the user experience and the user's connection to the gun itself. So many of these changes are ergonomic in nature, or just they make it easier, faster, more positive of an experience for you to use the gun. And so the next thing here I'll point your attention to, and I've got the VP9K here, but it's true also in the VP9F, but it's got a longer slide. And actually I think they have the same number of serrations on that front portion of and rear portion of the slide, but these slide serrations are what I would definitely consider to be improved. There are more of them, and the raised portion of the serrations is a little bit narrower. It's cut narrower, and while that may not seem to be a big deal, what I observe from handling the older VP9s, take this VP9SK even as an example, and the serrations were always fine. However, they're just even better now. It's a little bit grippier, a little bit easier, a little bit more of a positive experience for you to grasp these slide serrations, whether you grasp on the front like I'm doing here or grasp at the rear. And of course, the VP9's been known for having these little ear tabs, as some will call them, on the rear of the slide for you to grasp and aid in racking the slide. Those definitely work, and you're welcome to use those. Some people are bothered by those and even remove them or put a flat filler piece in there. I've not particularly used those. I grasp the serrations, and the serrations now are improved. And so that's another improvement to the user experience. The mag release, in the case of the paddle mag releases here, has some serration texture to them as well. And so compared to let's see, actually I don't have it on the table here. I have another HK pistol with the older style paddle release. I just forgot to grab it, and it's smooth. And it's not that it's causing any issues necessarily, but just having that little bit of texture there does ensure that your finger's not going to slip off of that paddle. Whether you use your index finger to press it or use your thumb to press it, you have a little bit more of a serration there so that hitting the mag release is not going to cause you any issues. There's another little thing though, and on the frame itself right here, molded into the polymer of the plastic frame, is this serration texture here, which is really intended to be an index point. So for those times when you're supposed to not have your finger on the trigger, non-shooting times, you can very quickly and easily find that and go, I'm in the proper position, in the home position as far as where my index finger is, my trigger finger, so I know I'm not on the trigger, inside the trigger guard, on the trigger guard. We want to see it up here as a safety, you know, it's a safety thing. So it's a subtle thing, it's a minor thing, and probably some of you think it's not that important, but it's appreciated because why not? It's something that could have been done before and it wasn't, but now it is. And so really what we're seeing is a lot of improvements to the control surfaces of the VP9A1 series of guns that improve the user experience and your connection with the gun. Better grip, more ergonomic, it's going to fit more hands, I think. You got better, you know, ability to grasp and use the slide, the mag release, the slide stop or slide release. You've got an improved magwell so that you can insert and do reloads a lot easier, a lot quicker, a lot smoother, less hang up. You've got improved ergonomics on the base pads of the magazines. You got an improved trigger, and that's also improving the connection, the experience of user to gun. And so all these things, I think, are the proper steps in the right direction with respect to these A1 guns. And so let's talk about something else so that's important here to know and understand. So the word on the street is that HK is going to move to a lineup of guns where the original VP9, in other words, the 4-inch barrel on a full-length grip, is going to be discontinued. All right. Essentially, the thought being that the VP9F will fill that void. And I think it'll do that just fine. I don't see a major issue. I know a few people will gripe a little bit about wanting to have that shorter barrel length, especially in the case of like a duty holster or an OWB worn holster. But we're talking a ½ inch here. So I don't know if that's going to be a huge problem. And then again, if you really do want that shorter barrel length, you could actually just use a VP9K. So there's that. But there's another rumor on the street, and I'm actually not even necessarily classifying it as a rumor. I think it's probably very much true, and that is that the VP9SK is also going to be discontinued. So I think I have a little bit of a sweet spot or soft spot in my heart for the VP9SK. I've carried it quite a bit, shot it quite a bit, and I really like the VP9SK. I think it's a phenomenal pistol for its form factor and size. For a small gun, even with the flush-fitting magazine in it, I think it's very shootable. I think it's a very, very good gun. Yes, it has the full-size width to it, which some people would say is not as preferable for concealed carry, but that never really bothered me. And just having a gun that I could, you know, a gun that shot kind of like a full-size gun, but with a really short grip, made it a very concealable option that gave me dang near full-size performance, at least in my experience. I really like how the VP9SK shoots. And so the thinking is that these two models will get deleted and that the lineup for HK will look more like this: a VP9L, VP9F, VP9K, and the CC9 filling the void of kind of where that subcompact pistol would sit. And so that is what it looks like is going to happen. I haven't had that confirmed, but that is the word on the street. So whether that is a big deal to you or not, that's up for you to decide. I think this is a fantastic lineup of pistols here, though. Now, to be in full disclosure, I have not yet shot the VP9F or VP9K. I've not had the opportunity. It's been the holidays. I've not been able to get out to the range to actually test fire these guns. However, having experience on several other VP9 pistols, I'm confident that they'll run and they'll work just fine. It's more of I'd love to have gotten a little more personal experience with them and experience some of those ergonomic enhancements that we've talked about more directly under fire. So, but I'm really liking the form factor of the VP9K. I think this is going to fill the role for those looking for a mid-size, compact, concealed carry option that is probably capable of delivering full-size performance with a little bit of a shorter grip length and capacity. You're talking giving up 2 rounds for something that's a bit more concealable and gives you really excellent performance. And this, for a duty size pistol, I mean, in all honesty, I'm kind of intrigued by the idea of running a little bit shorter, lighter slide and just shooting some competition with it to see how that compares to the VP9L. I'm hearing positive reports from friends of mine that really like shooting this VP9F, and so I'm kind of curious by that. I'll mention one other thing here though. If you're really butthurt about some of the changes HK's made, and particularly by the discontinuation of the VP9 and VP9SK, I'll just mention, while it might cost you a little bit, if you really like the form factor of a standard VP9, I'm not saying this is endorsed by HK per se, but it seems like it's able to be done and probably non-consequential. But here we have essentially our VP9 original size and form factor right here. I put the VP9K slide on the VP9F frame, and consequently, if I wanted to have a shorter grip but retain a little bit more length in the slide and barrel, I could throw the VP9F slide on the VP9K grip or frame. And I actually really like that form factor right there, because this is my actual AIWB or appendix inside waistband carry holster, and you'll note that it is full length. It's able to support the VP9F, but getting that little bit shorter grip, which is not that different than a VP9SK grip length when you're using that extended mag, which is what I typically did. That's a very concealable gun for a full, size man like myself, in a holster that works, that carries very comfortably, that's well balanced on the belt, gives you full size performance. And frankly, out of both of these configurations, this is the one that intrigues me the most. One other thing, having this slightly longer length, for those of you that have not yet moved over, I didn't mention it, but you may have noticed that both of these guns came optic ready, and I think that's the way of the future, if it's not already the future now. And most of what I think HK is selling is optics ready now. These pistols are configured optics ready. That's how I would buy them. That's how I'd get them. If there's a non-optics ready version, okay, fine. But this is what I would do. Even if you're not going to set up for optics yet, you might do that at some point in the future down the road, and that's a good thing to be ready for, and to have the option to add, in this case, a Holosun SCS optic, which directly mounts to the optic cut of these VP9 pistols. That's a good way to go. But in the case of those of you that are still using iron sights, then having that little bit longer barrel length and slide length of the VP9F is a winner in terms of getting a little bit more precision on long distance shots out of your VP9. A little, another extra ½ inch might not seem like much, but it can actually make quite a difference at distance when you're trying to be precise. And that keeps you from having to go to the even larger VP9L for that, extra sight radius length as well. So those are my first impressions and kind of the overview of these new pistols, the A1s, the VP9F and VP9K from HK. I hope you found this video to be informative and helpful, perhaps in making a decision yourself or just seeing kind of what's new, what's coming out there. I'm excited, I'm enthused about these new offerings from HK. I'm looking forward to putting some rounds downrange in the near future with these, and I will report back hopefully with additional information on how that goes when I get that opportunity. Thank you for watching.